Awesome. So let's see. I was not here the last time you were going through Bookliker. So I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and just kind of go through the beginning stuff pretty quickly, just so you can see how I do it. And we'll have another build from scratch way of doing it. And then I think when it gets to the actually liking books part is when it seems like a lot of folks were having some difficulty. And I'll ask y'all some questions about how you were doing it, but hopefully I can show you a way that might make things easier, because there's no right or wrong, but there are definitely easier and harder ways to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Cool. I'm going to move y'all chat up. Those controls, move everyone over here. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. So I have pulled down the repo. It looked like there were a couple of repos. I pulled down the most recent one, or the most thorough one. And I'll just pop that into code here. We can dispense with terminal altogether. I'm going to open up the, oh, there it is right there. Cool. I don't need any SQL tools, but thank you. Awesome. So this is Bookliker. We need to start up with little servers. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to get information from an API. We're going to use that information to populate a web page with it, update the DOM. We're going to attach user events to some things and update the DOM in response. And if we get to it, we'll send data to an API using patch, but that's not on the code challenge, so that's nice to have. It's interesting, I think, that the learning goals here, or the objectives or deliverables, whatever you want to call them, are, well, I mean, they are descriptive. They say we're going to get some data and we're going to put it on the page, basically. There's a middle part I feel like is not really talked about much that will make life easier. I'll talk about it more when we get to it. So I have a JSON server installed, so I'm just going to start that file up here. We have our JSON file with all the good stuff in it. It's great. I'll start a JSON server. Yeah, great. So I'm just going to start it up with this. You used to have to do a -w. I'm just going to start up this, and this will be serving up our data on localhost 2000. It gives us these two routes to use, so I can go look at either one, and they should be able to show me all the data we want. Fantastic. Cool. So this is the data we're looking at for books and users. Awesome. I'm going to open up another window here and open up my light server. And that's just going to give me a simple web server that's going to give us all the stuff, starting with index. And I'll open up my console with Option Command J, fave icon, no problem. Just going to touch that. No problem. Great. Just to get rid of that error. Okay, so what do we want to do? We want to make it look like this. So the things we need to do are get to the books, and we're going to create a bunch of LIs on the side here and add the book info. We're going to have to show details for the books, which means that each of those is also going to need some kind of thing to handle that click, probably an event handler. And this is the part where we're going to spend more time on, I think, in the like a book. So I'm going to kind of run through these first two pretty quickly. I encourage you to stop, just holler and ask a question. I've got y'all on my other monitor here, but if I don't see you, it's easier to hear you. So just interrupt me at any time, ask questions, ask for further detail, ask me to repeat something that I said, anything at all. This is your time, so let's get it. So first thing I want to do is, take a little look at what we have here. In our index HTML, pretty straightforward. We've got a side panel with a list, and then the show panel, div, show panel, all have IDs. Great, love it. And we're loading up our JavaScript here. I'm going to throw a defer in here so we don't have to add the DOM content loaded thing. And I'm going to use option arrow up to bring that up there. I just like it that way. That you can leave it the other way if you like. It's fine. So first task, we have our JavaScript file. First task is, oh, look at that. Thank you. We don't need you anymore. Nope. First task is making sure the file loads. First thing I always do, every single project I do, make sure we got stuff loaded. Great. We're working in the same file. Don't know how to tell you how many times I've done a lot of code and wondered why it wasn't working and realizing I was editing a file that I wasn't loading somehow. Great. So we're in the right file. First step, we're not doing the DOM content loading because we're deferring this, which basically does the same thing with less typing. So that's great. One less event listener to worry about. So what I'm going to do here is our first thing, and I'm going to make a get to our books here. So here's our URL we're going to get. I'm going to, do we do the users at all? Do we use anything with users? Details, books, one, patch request. Yeah, okay, cool. We'll look at that in a second. First off, we're just going to look at the books. So I'm going to set my URL I want to a constant just so it's easier. Books API. In case that changes down the road, which it won't, but so we would like to do a fetch to that there. So fetch, and we're going to do the books API, and there's no additional data we need because it's a get. So we're just going to do our JSON dance here. I'm just going to console log out what we get back. Option Shift F formats. Great. So now when the page reloads, it should hit that API and log out the data that we have. And it looks like it's doing that. Great. So we have our book data. Step 1A complete. So we've got that. And now we're just going to create a list item for each one. I'm going to do this straightforward. And if we need to refactor, we will. So I've got in my index HTML a very descriptive list. I'm going to go ahead and call this book list. At least list is the least descriptive term you could use, except for maybe data. So we'll say unordered list is our book list. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that element and we'll start doing stuff with it. So I'll put it in a variable here or a constant list. And we all know how to do this. Get element by ID, book list. Awesome. And if I wanted to, I could console log that out to make sure we got it. I'm pretty confident right now. Maybe less so when it doesn't work. So here is where we want to do our work here. And I'm just going to, I'm going to write a Renderbooks function. So this is the function that is going to run after our data gets pulled down, and it's going to get our JSON passed to it. So I'm going to say down here, functino. And here's our, I could say JSON here, not super useful semantics wise. So I'm going to say books for now. And those will be book objects. And I can console log it out here and verify that we are getting the data we want. Awesome. So I want to go through each thing, and we see that we are getting a list, an array of book objects, each with a author, description, ID, image, subtitle, title, and some users attached to them. Interesting. So let's go ahead and start doing stuff with this. I'm going to do a for each over the books. And I'm actually going to make another little function here. Say render book singular. And so all this is doing is saying for each one of those things in there, we're going to render it out. We're going to put it on the page somehow. I'll write another function here. And I'm pulling these out into functions straight off. Often I will write that code inline and then refactor it into functions. I'm just kind of running through this part, but hopefully this will also help us as we go forward. And definitely as we go into phase 2 with React, you'll notice some similarities in that we have data that we're rendering to a page. I think I might have talked about model view controller stuff here, where our model is the data that we're looking at. Our view is how we're looking at the data, in this case, a web page, and controllers are how we interact with that. Basically, the functions we use to interact with the data. That's going to be event handlers and anything else that we use. So for right now, this render book is modifying our view when we get our data in, which is great. So for each book, we have that data there. So yeah, Lauren, question.
Yeah, so for the render book and render books functions, what you pass in the parameter, you can name it whatever you want. Is that cool?
Yep.
Okay, so if you can name it whatever you want, like how does the computer know like what that is?
It doesn't. The computer doesn't care what it is. The computer just knows you're giving me some stuff, and inside the function, you're going to be doing stuff with that stuff. The name is purely for you, because the computer doesn't know what a book is, or that even this is a book, an object representing a book. All JavaScript knows is that this is a function that's taking something. In this case, it is an array. And the name books for the parameter there is purely for the programmers. We could call everything X, Y, Z, ABC. It would still work fine. It would be nigh impossible to understand and work with. So yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
All variable names, but especially stuff that we're passing in, those are all named for us so that we know what they are. And if it turns out that they are confusing or no longer accurate as we code, we can change them. It's just code. We can change it as much as we want. There's nothing's written in stone.
Well, so to build off of that question,
yeah.
And I still have problems with the same thing too, Lauren. And I understand the concept of it, but like what I think maybe what she was asking is more like how does JavaScript know to correspond the specific data that you want with the word books or whatever it is that you're putting in there?
Yeah, so we're doing our fetch here, right? And Renderbooks is the function that we're sending that data to. It's kind of the same as doing this. So where our then is getting our JSON back from the fetch, and it's sending it to this Renderbooks function. So we're just calling that with the data that we're getting back. And that's how, all it knows is that, oh, I'm getting something here, and I'm passing that in. The reason I like to do it this way, so this is, then takes a function here, right? And this is a little arrow function that takes in JSON, and inside the function runs the function Renderbooks with that JSON it takes in. We can just as easily say, hey, take that, take that stuff you're getting and just send it to this function here. So, and then inside the function, it's just like any other function. It's just like, hey, I'm defining a function that takes some stuff. I'm calling that stuff books inside the function. And then we do stuff with that. We could call it whatever it wants. Does that kind of hit what you're asking?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. And I know that this can be, that sort of through line can be a little bit confusing sometimes. And it's always going to be, it's just a matter of tracing that line through of like, oh, okay, first we're doing the fetch, and then that then is getting some data, and we're passing that data to this function, and this function passing it to this function, and this is doing the other thing. And it's just following that thread of logic through, which is, you know, not what our brains are necessarily wired to do. It just takes practice. Great question though. Yeah. Anything else before I proceed with this? Awesome. So let's see. To render a book, I'm going to throw some stuff in the book list. In fact, I'm just going to move this down here. Option down arrow is going to move that there. Format a little bit. Great. So it's going to do that select inside of our function instead of outside of it. Rule 3 is efficiency, so we don't really care about that much. If it runs through a problem later, great. Right now, it's not a problem. So I like to put stuff like this closer to where we're using it. You know, I could, since we're going to be using it, you know, below here, I could just move that up to the top and just use book list. I think it's easier to understand when you define the things you're working on closer to where you're working on them. So you don't have to, especially once your programs get bigger, you don't have to start looking around everywhere for what you're doing. And then if it's slow later on, we can fix it later on. But for now, we're just making it work. So we're taking the book, and this is the book list element. I'm going to call it the book list element. Oops. I'm just going to call it book list EL element, because our books is kind of our book list. I'm just going to say that is an element. So we want to create a list item for each book, or for the book in here. So I'm going to make a book list item, and I'm going to create it here. Type. Awesome. So now I need to put stuff inside that list item, and we want to just put a title in there. Great. Our data looks like this, so it's just going to be in our code book.title, and so I'm going to say we'll say text content is our book, which we're getting from here. Title. So that is our li set up, and now we just have to attach it to the book list element. Yeah, so book list element, append, and you can use append or append child. I like append. The differences are very subtle. Either one totally works. Awesome. So we are, for each object, each book object, we are grabbing the big list. We are creating a new list item. We are setting the content of that list item to the title, and we're going to smack that list item on the list. And then since we're doing it for each there, that's great. Append can append multiples, and append child can append one item. Yeah, that's one difference. Append, there's also a little difference with how it treats text nodes, but for our purposes, this is fine. If you want to get fancy and like create a big list of list items and then append them all, you can do that. I like doing one at a time for reasons that'll show up soon. And you know, here, since we have a render book here, that's not necessarily tied to this, right? If we somehow got a new book, if we created one in the form or whatever, we just call a render book and throw that out there. So that's nice there. Will it mess up the scope? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had, so you had the const book list element up at the top, like in your global scope, and then you brought it back down into your function render book.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, does that mess up the scope for anything if you move it from the top, the global scope, or inside a function?
Yeah, so either one will work right now. You know, we can bring it in global scope, or we can bring it in here. Right now, I'm just putting it inside Renderbook. So like I was saying, like we know what it is in the function that it's being used in. If we had multiple functions that were using that, I might move it back out so that all those functions could get a hold of it. But it's either way works right now. I think it's a design choice depending on where you're going with stuff. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Cool. That was a lot of talk. Let's see if it actually does what I said it does. Am I lying? No, I'm not lying. Great. I'm telling the truth, but I'm lying. Great. Cool. So that did our first thing. That listed all our books. Any questions about how we got that to work? I think you all were up to this point before. Awesome. I'm going to do the second part here. So when we click the title of the book, it's going to show the thumbnail and description, list of users who have liked the book. Information should be displayed in that show panel. Fantastic. So what we want to do here is when we create our list item, and I'll do it before. It doesn't really matter when you add the event listeners as long as it's on there. I like to do it before I append, just so it's kind of order of operations. Either way will work though. So I'm going to add an event listener here. And it's going to be a click event, and it's going to be in quotes. And let's see. So we want this event listener to take the data from this book and throw it into the big guy over there. So I'm going to do this in line for right now. And if we want to refactor it in a bit, we can. So I'm just going to take the event and we're going to do stuff with it. We're not using the event, so I'm just going to, oops, 90. I'm going to do that for now. If we need it later, we can go back and put it in. So when it clicks, we want to grab the show panel here. So we're going to grab this div with this ID. So again, I'm going to say cause the show panel. Show panel, right? Yeah. Great. So I'm going to do it the straightforward way, and then we'll see what the problem is first after I do that. So I want to add in the what? I want to add in the thumbnail, description, and list of users. Great. And we have all those in our data, thumbnail, description, and list of users. Fantastic. Not the title? That's interesting. It says everything. Cool. I'm just going to do what it says. So first couple are easy. We're going to grab that show panel. We have it. Is it looking for a certain way to do it? I don't know. I'm just going to throw the image in there. So first off,
sorry, Mark, I don't want to cut you off, but like this is a
Cool.
good kind of stopping point for like maybe how to help everyone out here. This particular one was hard for me because when I got to this point, it's extremely undescriptive about how it wants everything. And so it's like up to you to kind of guide that.
Exactly.
So maybe just like, you know, you can see that this is like an H4 and maybe an unordered list, but like, you know, that just to like walk through like how we would do this part, because I think that's helpful.
Yeah. So and that's a great point, because the depending on where you wind up working, sometimes these things will be your call, and sometimes everything is going to be laid out for you. In this case, it's really vague. So and there's no, I don't think there's any tests, right? There's no tests. So however you get that information there works. Even though, and we can see that the specifications are mushy because it's saying display the thumbnail, description, and list of users, when clearly we have the title and subtitle and author and description and list of users and thumbnail. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the visual description, because I think that's syncs up more with what I think it is. You raise a good point about the headers, the H's. Again, I like to do stuff semantically, which means that I don't use H3 to say small text. H's should be nested like an outline, right? Header 1, header 2 is inside that, header 3 is inside of header 2s or below header 2s. So we try not to use those for styling. It's inevitable. It happens all the time. I still do it. Nothing bad. I think I'm just going to make these bold or strong, emphasized, and then go from there. So there are a couple ways to do this. We see that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a bunch of different elements there. So we could go into our code, and we know how to create an element and put stuff in it and append it. So we can go in here, we can create an image element, and we can add a dot source to it, and we can append that. We can add a div or a span and make a bold thing inside that and append that. That's totally fine. That's great if you want to do that. If we want to do that, I would probably wind up writing some helper functions. So I'd have a function that's like add element, and then I tell it what kind of element it is and what I'm adding it to, and then pass it some stuff, and it would magically work. I'm gonna not do all that because that's an awful lot of typing. I'm gonna do it a different way. And some people may say it's cheating, but if it works, who cares? So we have our show panel. And I want to set the HTML inside that show panel, which I could do by creating everything by hand. Instead, I'm just going to set the inner HTML. I'm going to use backticks so I can do more than one line here. And now I can just type HTML here. So I can do image source equals. And since we're in the backticks, we can do interpolation, these template literals. So I can do that. I actually want to put in quotes, right? And so I can say image source is the book. What is it? The book image underscore URL. Great. And that should put that image in there for me. Does it do anything? Hey, look at that. It does it. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the HTML in there. And I'm going to put in the title, the subtitle, the author, all that good stuff. And I'm just gonna. I don't want to put them in divs, but I'll put them in divs. Fine. I'll put it bold. This is not great semantics, but we'll get it done first and make it pretty later. So this is going to be the book title. Let's make some copies. Option Shift down arrow will copy a line. I'm going to subtitle, the author, and it's going to be the description. And we don't want that to be bold. Oh, and in fact, I messed all that up there. That. What have I done? There. Boom. 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 So now I'm just appending all this HTML there. Again, we could do it by individually making each thing. That would be a lot of typing. So I'm not gonna. Cool. So we have grapefruit, subtitle, author, blam. Sweet. That looks great. And we want to also do the 25 issues. I know what they are, alts, I know. We should put alts in there on the image. Accessibility is very important. So we've got all those things on there. And we also want to do a list of the authors. So what does that look like? Or not a list of the authors, a list of the users who have liked that book. Users, and I suppose this is how we have users that have liked this book. So this is an attribute. I talked with a few of you already about this because it's a little bit tricky. So if we look at our GIF here, it's just another little li with a list of the usernames. So that means there's a ul here. So let's put that ul in first. Cool. So now I want an li for each one of those things in book users. So if I look at it, I wonder what this is going to look like. Book users, or no, book, is it users? Data, please. Users, yeah. So I'm just throwing that array in there. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to show up as. Object, right? Because these are objects here. So it's just saying, hey, there's a couple objects in there. I don't know what they are. So basically, and again, there's a few different ways to do this. We could construct this by hand, right? We could create a new ul element and then do a for each, and for each of the users, attach the username to that with an li, and then append that ul element onto the show panel. We already know how to do that, so I'm going to show you another way how to do it. And this is a technique that will become very, very, very familiar to you next phase in React. So I think it was Kevin who I talked to the most about this. So we want to transform this list of user objects into a list of LIs with the username inside. We have some super handy, pretty powerful functional methods on arrays that we can use to do stuff like that. Our good friends are sort, filter, map, reduce. Get super good at those four and you'll be magic. The one we want to do is little piggy goes home. We want to do map. Map is a method on array that returns a copy of that array that is transformed in some way. So basically it's used for turning an array into another array, a new array of the same size that has each element changed in some way. And in our case, we want to change this user object, this ID and username. We want to change this object into a string that is an li with the username inside. So I'm just going to do this in line here. It's probably not going to make a lot of sense up front, but I'm happy to talk about it in great detail. So I'm going to use map on book users on that array we had object in. Map is a method that takes a function as an argument. It's a higher order function. So we're going to pass a function into it. And the function we're going to pass into it is just telling us how to transform each element. So if we have an array that's 2, 4, 6, 8, we can map and say, hey, I'm going to pass you a function that takes an argument and returns that argument times 2. And that'll transform that 2, 4, 6, 8 into 4, 8, 12, 16 map. So in this case, we want to turn a user object that has an ID and username into a string that is an li with that username inside it. So it's going to be an arrow function. So we are going to take in the user object, and we're going to return a string. And the string is going to be an li. And inside that li, we want the username of the user. So we're going to use string interpolation again. And notice that we're doing string interpolation inside of a string interpolation. It's totally okay to do that. It can mess with your head a little bit, so don't get too deep into it. But as long as you know what you're doing, it's okay. So we're going to change that user into the username and wrap it in an li. So this is going to give us, I don't know if this is going to give us what we want actually, but let's see what it does give us. Hey, it actually does. My concern was that it was not going to concatenate those into a single string. If we did that, we might want to do a join, but we're fine. So again, this is inside that UL. We are taking our list of users. We are running map on it to turn the list of users into a list of strings that are li with the username inside. And that's going to give us what we want there. This is a way to do it. There are many other ways. As long as they work, they're all right. And this, especially this line 26 here, you're going to be seeing stuff that looks a lot like this all over the place in React. So it's a little bit dense. I'm happy to talk about it and answer questions. I also encourage you to play around with it at your leisure. But that satisfies objective 2. What questions do we have?
Did we want to also list the number of likes that user?
Let's see. So I think it's just
Oh,
doing
it's just the
this.
name. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just doing the name. I'm not sure why it's giving us a big space in between them. Expect that. Oh, because it's putting a comment. So oh yeah, because I can see that comma there. So I am going to concatenate that. So this is a list of LIs. I'm just going to join them with a string, an empty string. So it's going to turn that array into a string. And there we go. That's what we want. And so now we can see that if we inspect it, it's exactly what we want. Fantastic. Cool. Yeah, other questions, especially about the map thing? And I don't think there's going to be anything that tricky on the retake. Yeah, so this is another nice to have. But you can also, again, do it the old way or not the old way, the other way, by creating the elements individually and throwing them on there. Both ways work.
If you were to do this with a for each for them, to make the LIs on all of them, what would you do to be able to access the deeper array of objects from book to users?
Yeah. So I would do something like, so I've created that inner HTML. Let's say it's without this. Not great. I don't think that's going to work, but we'll find. So what I would do, I would create our user list, create element. That's going to be UL. Then I'm going to go through so book users is that array of user objects. So I would just do a for each on that. And in that for each, I would, const user li. I'd create that li. I would set the text content to the user's username. And then I would append that to our user list. And then when I was done with that, I would show panel append our whole user list. Let me delete this together. So that's how briefly you would do that. You would create your UL, you would do a for each on that user list, and then just throw each one in that UL. And then when you're done, append the whole UL there. Am I lying? Does that work? It looks like it works. Awesome. Oh yeah, so again, there's countless ways to do the same thing. It just depends what you like. A, is that what you were asking? And B, does that make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense. You just have to take it step by step, I guess, build your UL first and then append the UL after onto the show panel that you've already defined as a variable.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and again, we could do the same thing with all of these. We could create an image and throw a source and an alt on there and append that. We could create each one of those divs individually. I just think the other way is faster. I'm going to go ahead and do this. Cut, rewind.
And with your inner HTML method that you've used here, that just, it allows you to add HTML elements with the concatenated targeted values that you want in there at the kind of at the same time, rather than just doing it all manually. Is that the difference between the HTML?
Yeah, and I think the benefit of this method is that, and again, I think this method is more for the programmer than the program. This one reads more like if I just open this, I was like, oh, you're throwing a bunch of HTML with that data in there, as opposed to this, I would have to take my time and read through that and understand, like, oh, I'm creating this and adding this and appending that, and okay, I can see that. So it's a lot more readable for a person, I think, which is more important than it being, more computery. I value readability over pretty much everything. It should work, but after it works, readability. Yeah, awesome. What other questions do we have here? Kevin, yeah.
So with the map, it's only restricted to arrays.
Yeah, map is just for arrays.
Okay.
Yeah. The question you might be pointing to is there something similar to that for objects? Yeah, there's not really. Objects are key value pairs, and they don't have any inherent order. So you can't be guaranteed that those are going to show up in any order. What you can do is use the object keys or object values or entries and turn that object into or get a list of the keys or values from that object, and then you can do a map on those. So you can get the same effect, it's just not built into the object. Yeah, and we will definitely be seeing that in React as well. Yeah, because React kind of like forces you to do stuff this way, not exactly the same way, but this flavor. So you'll get real used to doing this map thing, especially. Awesome. What other questions do we have here?
Just kind of hoping we can go over the like button part of it.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Cool. Let's move on ahead and ask away as we get there. So like a book. User can like a book by clicking on a button. Display a like button along with the book details. Great, easy. When the button is clicked, send a patch request with an array of users who like the book and add a new user to the list. So if you are user 1, how do we know who we are?
For me personally, like I just wanted to make sure we could go and because I don't think we're doing the patch request for the
Yeah.
right. So I just wanted to more be, even if it doesn't persist, like to be able to have user ability with the like button. So if you want to do the patch, I don't know about everybody else, but for me, I just wanted to make sure that part of it worked. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, let's do it without the patch. It would be adding the patch is just an extra step. The rest of it would be the same. So again, this is a little bit mushy. It doesn't really say who we are. Do we have a user? So send with an array of users who like the book and add a new user to the list. That's weird. I don't like that. But so because what it's asking is get all the current things, send that whole list instead of just sending the new user. I have notes on the data structures, but we'll make it work anyway. What we really want to do is add a new user to that list of likes and update the list. It doesn't specify who we are or what the user is. So I'm just gonna throw that as a constant up here. If this was a real application, we would log in and get a user ID and have a user profile and all that stuff. Right now, we're just gonna assume that we are logged in and we have stuff. My user. So my user is gonna be, what do the IDs look like? All little numbers. Great. So my user ID is that, and my username is Mark Major. Great. So that's who I am. That's who I'm logged in as, and that's who we're going to be adding stuff to. So first off, let's add our button to here. I'm going to leave this code here just so you can see it. And so in the render book here, and again, this is getting a little chunky. I might think about breaking this out somehow. I'm not sure yet, but it's starting to smell a little thick to me. But right now we're going to add that button. So const like button is a and I'm doing this actually question me. I'm doing this as a creating an element and appending it because I need to add an event listener to it. And it's just easier to do that if we create it and append it instead of grabbing it out after we've done the other stuff. So like button is like single quotes. So that should throw a like button on there. Or if I append it, and that'll do it. And it is the show panel. Great. So there's our like button. Doesn't do anything yet. Back to console. So we are going to add an event listener to our button. Fantastic. That's going to be a click. And it's going to do something. What's it going to do? What it's going to do is take our current user and so here's where we do our patch here. Go here. When it comes back, do the, well, it would just redo a get and render. So if we were to do that patch, we would just say, cool, do the patch. When the patch comes back, do another get, I guess, and get the new stuff and display it again. Or do this. If we want to optimistically render, which I feel like we would. We want to take our current user, which is in my user. We want to add it to book users. I'm just going to push it on there. So I'm just going to add my user on there. And so I just updated that data by changing that list, but that's not really going to do anything. So what I need to do is render book. And since I know what book is already, I can just say render book. And so what this will do is when the button is clicked, it's going to call this function again. But nope, that's not what I want to do because that's going to render the book LI. What I want to do is render the show panel. Aha, that's where we go. So like I was saying, this smells a little thick to me. So I'm going to pull this whole bit out and say render show panel. And so I'm going to throw this in another function here. I'm going to have to do a little bit more fussing with this. Show panel is going to need a book to render. And I can call it the same thing because this is scoped to inside the function. So it doesn't matter if two different functions have the same parameter, because that is scope just to that function. We could have 100 functions that take in book or data or ham sandwich. So let's make sure all this is a book list element. Book list element is going to need to great. Clean up the end here. I think that'll do it. Format, great. So the event listener here, it needs to tell show panel what book to do. And I can't just do that because that would call render show panel with book there, and it would just flicker through all the books immediately as it renders and land on the last one. So again, an event handler is a function, so we need to give it a function. So I can just make this little function and say, hey, when you get clicked, run this function that renders the show panel for this book. Let's make sure this does what we felt like. Great. So refactoring makes it work the same way as it did before. That's what we want. And now we've broken out our thick boy here into another function here. And so render show panel, this is great because we're saying, and this is independent of our fetch and all that stuff. We're just saying, hey, anytime you call this function with a book, it's going to throw that book's details in the show panel and create this like button. And so now when we create this like button, we are pushing our user onto that user list for the book. And we know which book it is because we're passing it here. And then we're just calling render show panel. That's what we want to do. That's why I did this. Render show panel. So when it clicks, it's going to say, hey, cool, I know what book I am. I'm going to render show panel for that book. And since we've updated the user list, it should render it with that new list of users. Feels like a lot of extra processing or work to do since we're just adding one new list item to that list. And instead of just doing that, we're re-rendering the entire thing. It's fine. JavaScript is JavaScript. If we were doing this 10,000 times on the click button, we would probably want to optimize it more. In this case, we don't need to worry about efficiency just yet. So let's see if that works. Let's go to Angela Davis, click like, and I'm like 90% confident this is going to work. Let's see. Hey, I liked it. If I click again, it's going to add me again too. And since we're not doing the patch, it doesn't stick. But I should be able to like this and then go back to another book and then come back to this one, and I'll still be on there because I updated that user list in our data. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much that. If we did a patch, we would just do a patch and then do this when the patch comes back. But yeah, that's the simplest way of doing it, I think. Yeah, there are more complex ways, but I think this works just fine. Yeah, Kevin.
Question regarding line 19. How come you had to pass that into an anonymous function?
Yeah,
Instead of just leaving it the way the way it was before.
Yeah, so add event listener takes a function here, so it needs a function. So we're making that function here. If we just did this, we're calling this function here. So what that's going to do is render the show panel for that book. And since we're doing it for all of them, it's going to render all the show panels for every book and land on the last one. And then we're telling it, hey, when you click, run whatever function this function returns, which is nothing. We're not returning anything for that function. So this is going to go through and end on Behold the Dreamers. And then when we click, it's going to do that because I did that. Book list item, that's what it was. Book list item isn't going to do anything because we're not returning anything from there. So yeah, and this is something that you'll stumble upon a lot. This calling a function versus making a new function that calls it for an event listener, or even if you're doing a map or doing anything else that takes a function as an argument. You're going to want to make sure that you are actually passing a whole ass function there instead of just calling the function, because we don't want this render show panel to fire off until they click it. And if we don't have that function, it's going to fire off as we're assigning the listener. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, you bet. Shippy, what's up?
So when I wrote this, I did it a little bit differently for like getting the username, and especially like this is a part that tripped me up when I first went through it, but when you just created the username constant, like makes sense now.
Yeah.
When I put this in I guess I want to know what is the reasoning or advantage, like you're re-rendering this entire book panel again to add that like comment in, versus just like I did add event listener, created a new LI, and then added like the text content via string interpolation to say my username liked this book, and then just reappended it to that existing UL. Like, is there a meaningful difference between the two?
In this case, yeah. That way it will work until you go to a different book and come back. Because when we're showing that panel, that panel is our view of the data. That the data we're getting back, that is just showing us one way to look at that data. And when we update that view with new stuff without updating the data, it's not going to be there if we go to a different book and then come back to it, because we just changed the view, just change the render without changing the data that it's rendering. So in this case, we want to update the data and then make sure the view reflects that data again, so that if we go away and come back, it'll still have that data that we added to it.
So in the way that you currently wrote it, if you update a book with you like this book and you go away from it and come back, it'll still be there.
Yeah, so refresh. I have grapefruit here. I'm going to like it. I'm going to go to Invisible Women. That's not going to have me. If I go back to grapefruit, I'm still going to be on there because I updated that user list in the list of books. So when I say, hey, display the info for that book, it has the updated data. And so it's going to display that.
But both of these versions of this, or both instances, will go away unless we do a post request to make the data persist.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is just in the page.
Right. So in the instance of like mine, if I added the post request in this like button to send that data to persist, it would be the same as if you run it through re-rendering.
So if you did that, if you change the data on the server, while adding that LI, if you reloaded the page, yeah, that would give you the correct data. If you just clicked away to a different book on this page without reloading, it would not persist, because you updated that view without changing the data underneath it.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, pretty much a general, it's not a rule, it's a guideline. You pretty much never want to change the display, the view, the HTML page. You want to change the data that you're working on and then redisplay that data somehow. It's a nice kind of linear flow, and you don't have to like keep track of a bunch of different things. It's nice to say like the page that I'm looking at reflects the data that I have, and you don't have to manage them separately and spin a bunch of different plates. You can do it. There's more to manage though. So this is a nice one-way flow of I click a button, I update the data, it changes the view, and I can click a button again, and the circle of life continues.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, not wrong, just easier this way, I think. In the future, even easier way might happen, and I'll have to change everything again. That's computer life. Awesome. Any other questions about this? or anything at all.
Will you post this video
Absolutely. Yeah.
today? Awesome.
Yeah. So when I'm done with this, I'll throw it up on YouTube, and I'll post the link in the Slack, and it'll also be on a playlist that's linked at the top of the channel. Yeah, and pretty much every single one of my videos, I'm going to do that for, because it's always good to show, like, next cohort. I'll be like, hey, you want to take a look at the Bookliker thing? I already did that. Just good resources for everyone going forward. Awesome. That's we're hit just about an hour. That's great. Again, I think this, I'm not a huge fan of this this here, both in the way that it stores the data, and this is an extremely bad way to store this data, and it's a little bit mushy, the description. So I don't really have the resources to update it, but interpreting ambiguous specifications sometimes comes with a job. If this was a real job, I would call up my PM or my product designer or whoever else and say, hey, this is ambiguous, make it more clear, or else I can't work on it. In this case, you just kind of make stuff up. Because we're focusing on learning the stuff instead of making an actual product. If this was an actual product, we would have a conversation. And I believe the code, all the code challenges are much better specified than this, so you should have a good time. Awesome. It's been great. I think an hour is good. Anything longer than an hour, I think, is kind of inhumane, but hopefully this is going to help out a lot. Feel free to roll through this again, or roll through the code challenge you took before. And that's the code challenge you took before is going to be a little bit closer to the one you're taking on, I'd say, tomorrow. Yeah, just go ahead and get that. And if you have more questions, feel free to post in the channel, and I will do my best. Lauren, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna ask about the code challenge tomorrow, like if it was more like the one that we took the other day or last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm gonna go through that and kind of code along. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it'll have some elements of this, I think, but it'll be pretty similar. So if you look at this, look at the not ambiguous parts of this. Don't worry about like the map stuff or figuring out how to add likes and whatnot. I think, yeah, just look at both of those, do a couple of build and burns, and yeah, I think you'll be all right.
thank you.
Yeah, cool. Any other questions before we take a little break? Awesome. Stop sharing and see your faces. There we are. Cool. Thanks for hanging out and going through this, and thanks for your great questions. Yeah, I'll see you all in a very short while. Catch y'all later.